Doing some composition again today. Let me get everything going here. All the things and stuff and junk and what have you. Where's the thing I need? Uh-oh. Well, it looks like LiveSpace may not be working right now. Well, I guess I will not be streaming to LiveSpace in a case such as that. That is in beta test right now, so that's not a big surprise. That all kind of makes sense. But we got everything else, so let's make sure everything else is up and running. In case I'm just not, in case it's something else I got going on. That is entirely possible. Looks like Nono's lagging behind. I think that's normal. I'm still not sure about the Nono Live platform. It looks like I may have to change my stream key on that one every time. I'm not sure. Nonetheless, we are streaming to an ample number of websites. So yeah, I'll have to. The go live part of LiveSpace is not happening. So there we are. So doing some composition today. I was getting set to do a normal show and realized that my hands were just like really, really cold. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to play well today at all. Yeah, it's an effort. So I was like, well, I'll just do a composition stream. I was like, I could jump in like a nice hot shower or something, which, I take a lot of showers, so that never hurts my feelings. But I was like, composition, I am kind of in composition mode right now, having just finished up Schizoid Paraphrenic. That's published, and I've been working on albums 67 through 70. So I was like, well, let's just kind of stay in composition mode here and see where that takes us. Always a good time. I enjoy it. I love doing composition. It's just a lot of fun. And so I've opened up Sailing Upon an Ocean of Blood. This is the one that we were working on probably 3 or 4 days ago. I think it was 3 days ago we were doing this. So I didn't feel like it was quite time to do a composition stream again yet, but circumstances occur, and that's what we get. So yes, that's what we're working on. It's the kind of stuff we're doing. And let me actually be smart enough to switch over to the sheet music being on the screen today, so that people can see what's going on. I think last time I did a composition stream, I didn't turn the screen on for like a half hour, and so then it was like, okay, what are we going to do with that? So with this, so this area here, this big kind of gray area down the bottom, that shows us where we have already composed things. So you can see here, most of this area is light gray, a bit of it is dark gray. Everywhere this dark gray has had at least one note filled in on that measure of music. And a lot of this, I've got my over here, I don't know how well it shows up. There's kind of a list of all of the instruments I have in, and I have a template set up in advance for my compositions for instruments that I'm likely going to be using. Last week we added in a harpsichord to this. I probably should put the harpsichord in my template. I actually use that a lot more than I use horns, and I have the horns in my template. But down below here, I got a synth. I've got my string section. I've got a pipe organ, some brasses, piano. Like I said, I need to put the harpsichord in there. And then up on the top end, we've got the rock ensemble, where I've got the drums, bass guitar, a rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and an acoustic guitar. And, so we've used a bit of this. And the acoustic guitar will kind of double up. It could be either a clean tone electric, it could be an actual, 6-string steel string acoustic, or it could be the classical guitar. So that kind of serves multi-function purpose there. And, sometimes I'll have to obviously adjust and put more instruments in. But really, it looks like all we've got is that to compose, as far as the rock ensemble, is this little break here. And is this the same? It looks like that's actually... Okay, so we actually composed that last week. And that's that harpsichord kind of funkiness. And I may end up altering that a little bit. Sometimes I don't always want to... Let's change the view here. Don't always want to use the exact same thing. But this, generally I write it with the idea that, section A, when it comes up again, I will just copy paste it in. And sometimes I'll make minor changes to it. And I'll usually put some kind of an indicator to let myself know that that's not an exact copy. But in this case, I think we'll take this and we'll put it in. And then if I feel later on that I need to change one or the other of them, certainly I can do that. So that fills that in. Oh, and I should also grab the guitars and bass from that section. And let's actually get the bass put down into the tablature correctly. Boom. So copy and paste this. So really all we've got to do as far as the rock ensemble is just this D section, and then the song will be composed fully. And then what I typically do after that is I go into my orchestration, and I think I'm gonna skip over the D section today. I think I'm kind of feeling some orchestration ideas here, and so I'm kind of just wondering, do I want to fill in some more harpsichord in this E section, or do I want to go into one of the other parts and work out? So generally, I'm either going to have a piano or harpsichord. I think overall I use pianos more than harpsichords. Or I will have a string section or some synths. And occasionally I'll put in some horns. Fistful of Light off of Incomprehensible Isolation, I think, are some of my favorite horns. I've used them in a few places. I used them in Three Blind Mice, actually, on that same album. I've got some horns just at the end. So a lot of times I'll use horns just to kind of beef up a string section because they're such a powerful sound. And then, of course, I have synths, and I'll use just a variety of different synth pads. I've got a couple of standards that I kind of shoot to. I've been playing around with different synths more and more because I was using an older software synth in my system, and it's been having more and more trouble to where on the latest versions of Reaper, it just shuts Reaper down. And I've tried to look into different things, and I haven't been able to get it to work. I've talked to some other people for whom it does work, and we have been unable to identify whatever it is that's different in our system. It's like maybe I've got another piece of software that's interfering with it. But this is one of these kind of things too, where you can just be like, okay, you know what, that synth doesn't work anymore. Good, because that makes me have to go look at some different synths and come up with different ideas and work with some different sounds. And it's really easy when you are, particularly when you're composing a lot, like I do, to kind of be stuck in your bubble. And it's like, okay, yeah, these are the sounds I use, and so I just reach for them. And suddenly when you can't reach for them, it's like, okay, well, what do I put in here? And then I guess the other one would be the pipe organ. And the way I put this song together, this has been put together for teaching purposes for a particular couple of students of mine, Finn and Giovanni, who are both just awesome guys. I've been very fortunate with students. Overall, I've always gotten along really well with my students. I haven't had very many personality clashes with students. And generally, someone comes to me, they're going to know if I'm the wrong teacher for them. I've been pretty fortunate in having a really decent retention rate for students overall. And so, yeah, that's great. So I think I'm gonna go to this A section here, and I'm gonna start to put in some strings with this. So generally speaking, with my strings, I compose it like a string quartet. Sometimes I will go to divisi. Now, what divisi means is that a string section will have two kind of subsections. Hypothetically, you could have more subsections, but typically it's two. And so you would have, your violas would be like split into two halves. Basically, one half would play the upper note, one half would play the lower note. Sometimes I do a bit of that. The intro to, I forget the name of the song, but the last song on the album, On the Contrary, I use a little bit of divisi in the violin, and basically it'd be like having a soloist violin kind of step out, but it's written in the divisi style. So, but generally speaking, I'm just writing as if it's a quartet, and that works really well for what I do. And I'm not trying in this case to create necessarily something that would be a standalone piece. In this case, the strings, the organ, the synthesizers, in some cases the brasses, those are really kind of working as a pad. A pad is just, it's a musical element that would kind of support the primary instrument. So like in jazz music, oftentimes this is going to be a Hammond organ. In a lot of like Billy Joel, Elton John style rock, you might hear horn sections doing this. Or again, you might have a Hammond organ, some sort of a synth. In more kind of straight ahead pop, a lot of synths are used. In heavy metal, not uncommon to have a string section, or maybe a choir or a synth choir do this. In my last album, Schizonoid Paraphrenic, I had synth choirs working in a couple of the songs, and I really liked the way that worked out, particularly on the title track, Schizonoid Paraphrenic. So in this case, this is kind of what I'm going for. And what I have found and again, this is something that it's worth looking at in yourself when you are getting into composition or you're working on your own work. It's like, why am I reaching for this? Is it just because this is what I normally do? Or is it because it fits the song? Now, I feel like my methods do tend to fit my music, but it's still one of those questions it's worth asking is, why am I reaching for this particular thing? And one of the things I found about myself compositionally is that when I am writing for a string section or for brasses or for winds, less commonly I occasionally will put winds in as well. And fortunately for me, I've got some pretty good brass, wind, and string samples that I work with, so it sounds really good. But these I will typically use what's called 4-part writing. And this is just kind of what your layperson would think of as classical music. And when I work with organs or synthesizers, I tend to be a little more contrapuntal. Contrapuntal it means in the nature of counterpoint. And what counterpoint essentially is you have two or more melodies that should all stand independently. So if you have written contrapuntally and written it well, you should be able to listen to any one line and it should be nice. It should work musically. And then you can listen to the whole thing together and it should work as a unit. And so like one of the things I try to do, particularly when I was learning counterpoint, but I still do this, is I feel like if my counterpoint is written well, I should be able to listen to I should be able to put any number of my elements in and it should work. So if I have a 4-part counterpoint, I should be able to listen to any one, any two, any three, or all four, and it should work. I should be able to put in or take out any particular line. And so that's kind of my barometer for whether or not I worked it correctly with my counterpoint. I talked about on the release show for Schizonoid that I opened up that album with 9-part counterpoint. Counterpoint, I would say your kind of typical counterpoint is 4 parts. The smallest number you could have is 2. You have to have at least 2 parts for it to be counterpoint. And I typically write in 2 to 4 parts. A lot of my synth stuff might be only 2 or 3 part counterpoint. 2 is really very common on my synths. 4 part is more common on my organs. But there again, depending on where that counterpoint is sitting, I may only use 2 parts on an organ because again, it's just working as a pad against a rock ensemble. But in this one, I went all the way up to 9 parts. And so I had written a 4-part counterpoint section for organ. And I really liked it. And then I was like, man, it would be really cool if I doubled this with a choir. So I just copy and paste it into a synth choir. And it works really well. And sometimes just, an organ and choir doing the exact same thing can sound really good. But I was like, I feel like this will work more effectively if I don't just duplicate it onto another instrument. So I'm like, okay, well, let me do this. So I ended up writing another kind of a pedal point line to, I shouldn't say a pedal point line, a line for the pedals on the organs. Wasn't really a pedal point as much. So I wrote in a 5th part for the organ, then I wrote the 4 parts for the choir. And my original 4-part counterpoint for that, I probably wrote in like 20 minutes. And I worked for like 6 hours on just 8 measures of music, just this little area where it's 9 parts. I worked for like 6 hours trying to make sure, because in counterpoint, I like to stay away from, in music theory in general, I like to stay away from the word rules, because these are not rules, they're guidelines. But if you follow these guidelines, it tends to lead you in very interesting places and very positive, interesting places. So nonetheless, this is kind of my way of coming around to the idea that, so I'm in a string section here, and I'm going to be using 4-part writing. And I do not strictly follow the rules of 4-part writing when I'm doing this. I'm fairly loose with the 4-part writing concept. But here's the thing. If you go listen to Bach or Mozart or Paganini, they also did not follow the rules. Because they're guidelines. These are great ideas, and they're there for a good reason. When you're studying these things, it's great to think of them as rules. But particularly here as well, the primary focus of music like this is not the pad. It is the rock ensemble. So that's kind of really what I'm going for here. So the first thing I'm looking at here is when I scroll out, I notice that I've actually got an 8-measure section, and it is repeated exactly in the next 8 measures. So I really only got to worry about 8 measures here. So what I often do, I'll take my bass, which in most cases is going to represent the root note of the music. It certainly doesn't at all times. Anyone who's watched me compose knows that I will put these things on the 3rds, the 6ths, the 5ths, the whatever. But I can get a pretty good sense of what's going on. And then I'll take these, and I don't want these to be exactly as it is here. So I'll basically take this. It's like, yeah, so this basically all qualifies as one chord in this section here. So from here to here, that's all just an F chord. I'm kind of adding in the 9 a little bit, but it's pretty transitional. It doesn't really, it's really kind of acting more as just a minor 9 on that chord in this case. Particularly here where the bass does not change. And I could change the bass, whatever, we're good. So I basically find, where are my actual chord changes? And then I just kind of simplify the sheet music to represent that. So like here, I am going from an F to a C. That 8th note is clearly on a C chord. And then I go down to the B flat. And so this just gives me a little bit of an outline with this. Now something like this, where I got these kind of slightly quicker changes, what happens here? Okay, yeah. So this is pretty good. So I may end up doing like some real kind of staccato stuff in that area. Don't ever really know until I get into it. And so like here's an example where In this case, up in the guitars, I'm on an F. And then, okay, so what I did in this case, so I'm on the F here. And then I bring in the 5 of that makes it a chord. And then I bring in the 3. So on the bass, I just left it on the root. And so I'm letting this basically all together here make a 1, a 3, and a 5. So we've got a full triad throughout the course of the measure. And that's a pretty cool way to do it. And then what I do here is I take the bass here and I make it match up. And then that helps this to actually feel like a chord change right here. So yeah, I kind of like what I did with that. Nonetheless, what that means is this could act as a whole note. Now here's the other thing I could do. If I were so inclined, I could use the string section to essentially force this last area to be a different chord if I were inclined to do something like that. Because no matter where your sounds come from, if you have the right set of notes, it becomes a particular chord. So I could say, okay, well, I've got these things going on. Well, if I add these other things in, I can make this something else. So this is a great aspect of composition, is you can say, okay, I want to drive this in a different direction, so I can do that. And I know that I can just remain open-minded to this idea if I want to. So here we've got a G note, so that's good, G. So here I'm actually gonna. So in this case, okay, what did I do here? So we've got an F and a B. It's an F and a B flat. Okay, so those are a fourth apart. So so basically what I did is I put the bass guitar on the 5 in this case. So I'm going to move that up to be the actual root, the B flat note, instead of on the 5. And it was an inverted 5. The 5 was below, so that actually makes it kind of a fourth, which if I'm working with more strict counterpoint or 4-part writing, that fourth is more commonly avoided. And that's just because there's this weird mathematical relationship of the intervals of a fourth and a fifth. And basically, a way you might think about it is an unsupported fourth identifies as a fifth. Your ear, I should say, you will identify it as a fifth without even knowing that you've done it. It's this just kind of a weird mathematical aspect of the relationship between the frequencies. And I mean, and that's something that we could totally go deeper into at some point if we wanted to. And of course, if there's ever anyone out there listening who wants me to go really deep on like the numbers of the frequencies and stuff, I'm always happy to do that, talk about difference tones and, intervallic frequency relationships and stuff. Sometimes I'll have to pull out my charts for that. I don't always have those numbers memorized. It's one of those things where probably there are some people out there who do have those kind of numbers memorized. For the majority of what I do, having those numbers memorized is not going to aid me in making a better composition. Understanding those numbers can be pretty beneficial. And again, it really depends on where you go. One thing I've often said about myself as a music teacher is, for any given student, what I hope to achieve with that person is that they are able to reach the goals they have set for themselves. And and I've had guitar students come to me with everything from I want to join a band, I want to start a band, I want to do recordings, I want to write my own music, to just I want to be able to strum some chords around the campfire with my grandkids. I want to be able to play cover tunes. I want to be able to jam along with Grateful Dead recordings. And every single one of those is going to be a different approach for me. I had a student a few years ago. Actually, the Grateful Dead thing. I was thinking of him, and apparently he had been to another guitar teacher, and the guitar teacher was constantly saying, "Well, you got to learn the circle of fifths and this and that." And I'm a big fan of the circle of fifths. I love teaching the circle of fifths. It's fascinating. But he was like, man, all I want to do is play some Grateful Dead tunes. And I'm like, cool, let's work on Grateful Dead. You're right. You don't need the circle of fifths to be able to play Grateful Dead tunes. That's not where you're going. So I was hopefully try to, really accommodate what my students are hoping to achieve, not just impinging my own ideas onto them. That's what these streams are for. This is all me here. Even though this particular composition was put together as something for my students, all I was doing was illustrating my particular methods of composing music. And then they can, pick and choose which parts of those they're going to want to use for themselves. A lot of people, particularly in the heavy metal arena, are very unlikely to use sheet music to compose with. And that's totally okay. It's not for everybody. So what I've done here, I put these into the cello line, and I made it so they're all just sitting on the root. So now we see the basic movement that the music is doing. And then I've just copied this to all of these places. And what I'm going to do here, for illustrative purposes, I'm going to push this over here, and I'm going to leave this just so we can come back and illustrate the difference between what your 4-part style writing is compared to just having all the instruments play the same notes. And then, the string sounds in this are decent. Better than a lot of the MIDI programs. So that's what it sounds like right now. And, that a lot of people might say, oh, that doesn't sound bad at all. Why not just leave it like that? And we'll make a comparison here. After we start to use some music theory and put some of this stuff in place, we'll go back and listen to these back to back, and you'll see and hear a very significant difference in how these things function. And I was just clicking over to Live Space again to see if that was working yet, but it is not. So we've just got our roots in place following the movement of the bass and guitars. And if we listen to what the bass and guitars are doing, we can get a sense of what this song feels like. And I just realized that in this measure, these should just be whole notes, because the chord kind of changes here. And so here again, as I've mentioned to my students many times, I've probably said this on stream more than once, you can always interpret a chord more than one way. That's just how chords work. Some people may argue against that, but I think it's a pretty weak argument, because if I just play like a really standard C chord on the guitar, now I've got a C note, an E note, a G note, and then I repeat the C note, I repeat the E note. Those are the first, third, and fifth notes of a C major scale. Nothing crazy going on here. So the most viable interpretation of this right now would be C major chord, and we just say C chord. We basically assume major in many cases. There are a few places where we don't, where we assume minor, such as the pentatonic. We generally assume minor on that. On a 7 chord, we assume dominant. If we have it would be a major 7 chord, or if we just say play a C7, that would be a dominant. So there are places where we don't just assume major, but for the most part we would. However, I could say that those notes are the 3, 5, 7 of an A. So I could say that I'm implying, in this case, an A minor 7 chord. And not a lot of difference between those chords. you hear the A in there, but it doesn't really make a huge difference. And contextually, I could absolutely put a C, an E, and a G in and have them end up being a 3, 5, 7 of an A minor 7 chord. So, and that's just one example. And that's just one different way I could interpret that chord. Because I could also say that it's the 5, 7, 9 of, in this case, I think we would have an F dominant 7 chord. Am I looking at that right? An F major 7 chord. So, and on and on. So hypothetically, you could say, well, any of the 12 notes could be our root, and we can reinterpret the chord there. So in this case, if I just look at the bass line, it looks like I'm moving from a B flat down to a G. G flat. Apologies, I keep forgetting my key signatures. It's from G flat to a B flat to G flat. But the guitar just holds the B flat all the way across. And so this is kind of like a B flat power chord with an add flat 6 to it. Is kind of what's going on there. And I may use that information in the orchestral section. I may not. It doesn't really matter. However, I could then say, well, maybe this is now the 1. So the G. So now we would have a G flat, a B flat, repeat of the B flat, and then we would have this F, and it would be like a 1, 3, 7 of G flat. So we'd have like a G flat minor 7 without the 5 for the last, bit of this, the last 3/8 notes of this measure. Neither of those interpretations are right or wrong. And when you are in a composition setting, it's kind of up to you. How do you, the person writing the music, wish to think about this piece of music? Because if you think about it one way, you may do something different than if you think about it the other way, or some other way yet. So it's worth thinking about. Now, in 4-part writing, generally speaking, what you're going after is a triad. And certainly you can use the 7, the 2, the 4, the 6. The 2, 4, and 6 can also be referred to as 9, 11, and 13. But generally, we're going for a 1, 3, 5. So, of course, we have 4 parts, hence the term 4-part writing. I know, I'm writing, and there are 4 parts, and we call it 4-part writing. Crazy how we come up with this stuff. So generally speaking, you're going after a 1, a 3, and a 5, a triad, which is only 3 parts, so one of these parts is going to be duplicated. And most commonly, we go after duplication of the root. But we don't necessarily have to. We can duplicate the 5, we can duplicate the 3, but they're just less common. And particularly the 3. The 3 is the part of the chord that makes it major or minor. One way my guitar instructor talked to me about power chords, which are only a 1 and a 5, is he referred to them as neutered chords. Basically, you can't tell one way or the other what it actually is. And that works really well for heavy metal and hard rock, a lot of distorted guitar type work, just because of the way the distortion works and a few other factors. But, so let's start this out. So here we have this F chord. We're in F Phrygian at this point, and we're starting out with an F. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually use this and say, okay, well, what if I considered the F to be the 3? Then I could put a D flat on here, turn this into a D flat major chord, right? Or what if I consider the F to be the 5? And then, I could turn this into a B flat, I guess it would be a B flat minor chord at that point. And again, no right or wrong answers here. Both of those possibilities could absolutely work. And that's why being able to think both in letters, note letters, and note numbers in composition can be very beneficial. But let's just start out here. One of the things I always look at is how high do I want what we would think of as the soprano line to be. because sometimes it's nice to kind of bring this down lower and not have as much presence in this string section. But sometimes it's good to have the string section really push things forward. So the question would be, do I want this on the 1, the 3, or the 5? And if I put it, so right now it's on the 1, I'm probably not going to go all the way up here. Even though this likely will never be played by an actual violinist, you know, I might start to find this kind of harsh on a real violin. An accomplished violinist is not going to have any problem playing that. But as I said before, you do need to understand the capacities and limitations of your instruments and your players. So I'm going to leave this on the root. And so basically, we don't want, if I were to move this down, and then I was to take it down to the 5, now if I was to leave this at the 1, these have flipped. So we generally leave these so that this doesn't come below, you know, the violin 1 does not come below violin 2, or vice versa, violin 2 does not go above violin 1. Certainly this, you know, this can be broken, but it's a general, again, it's a guideline. It's a guideline. Some people, I think, get a little too pedantic about these as rules, and I don't think that's a great idea. So maybe bring this up to the 5 and this up to the 3. Cool, now we've got our first chord there. And like I've talked about before with, you know, people have seen me, I'll be composing and I'll just delete a measure or 4 measures or whatever and be like, forget about it, doesn't matter. You can come back and change this if you feel that it will be better for what you're going to want to go after. So then now these here, the reason these are tied across like this is because this is where beat number 3 happens. And it's a really good idea, particularly beat 3, to let it be shown in the sheet music. This is where beat 3 happens. A lot of times people would do this with beat 2 as well, but definitely beat 3. So I mean, hypothetically, you could turn those into quarter notes and it would work. And again, even though this is unlikely to ever be played by actual humans, I think it's a good idea to understand these basic sheet music concepts. So, and again, you know, a lot of times I may just leave the bass on the root quite a bit. It will not always be the case. But one of the things we want to really watch for is what we call parallel fifths, or even better, just to think of it as repeated perfects. Perfects usually do not follow perfects. So octaves, unisons, fourths, and fifths in your major scale and in the Phrygian scale that I'm using are all perfect intervals. Why those are perfect intervals, we could talk about some other time if people wanted to. But so what that means is, if I were to take these to a 3 and those to a 5 and leave this on the root, so I've just done the exact same thing with both chords. Now, this is a root and this is a 5. This is a root, this is a 5. Those are parallel, meaning they've moved the same amount in the same direction. So they're both fifths and they've moved together. And then I would also have parallels here. So now between my outside voices, I have parallel octaves. Between both of my outside voices and the second violin, I have parallel fifths. So all around, this is not a great way to go about it. So what could I do? Well, maybe I could move this down to the 5. Now, of course, these are in the same place. Well, what if I move this to be the 3? This is now here. And this is, let's see, if I move this back down to its original position, that could work. So now we see things, they're not, it's like these are now in similar motion. They're both moving downward, but they're not moving downward the same amount. So this is a 5th, and this is a 3rd. That works much better. Much better. These are moving in contrary motion. That moves down, this moves up. Also right now, the lowest voice is moving in contrary motion to all of the other three. Here I've got, let's see, this is an A, this is a C, so that's a third. And these are parallel motion, so similar motion, they move the same direction, but not the same amount. So these are parallel, but they are parallel thirds, not parallel fifths. Let me make sure I'm absolutely right on that. This is an A note, a flat note. This is a C note. Yes, so these are thirds. Parallel thirds, parallel sixths, go crazy. Those work really well. And the reason that we're going after this kind of an idea is when you use parallel fifths, parallel octaves, or even when you go from a unison to an octave, so that would not be parallel, but it's still a perfect to a perfect, or if you go from an octave to a fifth, a lot of times, or fifth to an octave, so basically if you use a perfect and go to another perfect, a lot of times you lose the independence of voices. So when I was talking about contrapuntal writing a little while ago, I mentioned that you want this independence of your voices in counter. You want each of them to work alone very well. That's not necessarily the case in four-part writing. We do tend to, so I guess you want your four voices to each be recognizable, but they don't necessarily have to stand alone. So sometimes you might have one voice that's like four measures of just one note. So that standing alone is just kind of boring, but it will continue to work within the four-part concept. So there's always an element of contrapuntal nature in four-part writing. But we're not going to the same level as saying it must be contrapuntal. That's not as important. I'm actually going to take this navigator screen off, just give myself a little more real estate here. And I'm going to get a drink of coffee. Decaf coffee. Sarah and I drink decaf all the time. Caffeine just beats the crap out of me. It is so brutal. So, now one of the things we also look at here, particularly in your upper line, or again, what we would, even though this is not a human voice, we might think of this as a soprano line, is what is the kind of contour that we're playing with? Amongst your lines, the higher the line sits, probably the more important it will be as far as melody is concerned. You generally, if we listen to something like this, that upper line is probably what we will come away humming in our own minds. And so now here we basically go from an F chord to this G chord, sorry, F to a G flat, and we come right back to an F. And this is where we can really start to add some interest into what we're doing. So I can take this, and instead of just leaving it on the F here, I can move it to its 5. Right? So now this line is going to move downward instead of down and back up. And things like that can really help to add a bit of interest into what you're doing. So now, this is where we need, again, to exhibit caution. So this is on the 5. I've now moved this down to be the 5. And I want to watch this, because if I were to move this to the 3 like I did, then all of a sudden we start to move into this parallels arena. So I might want to do something like move this up to a 3. So that I'm not, basically if you exactly duplicate the order, or what we would call the voicing of a chord, to your next chord, you will almost certainly have problems with parallels. And so that kind of works out. Now, what we're using right now are known as block chords. meaning every time a chord changes, it all changes together. So there's a chord, there's a chord, and it's great on the computer. If I highlight these, you can just see them as a block. So they all start at the same time. And one thing that can be very beneficial is to have your note anticipated or suspended to avoid this. So if we have something come in a little late, so we've got this F chord being built up here, and I could say, well, what if I take this down to here? And I could actually just turn that into a half note in that case. Now, when these two chords cross over, this note is going to be held out. And this would be the 2 of my chord. And in this case, the chord here is an F, and this is a G flat note. So this, again, this may or may not be a good choice. What we're going to have here is a minor second in this chord, which is a very dissonant interval. Sometimes those very dissonant intervals can be really good, depending on how they relate to the other notes in the chord. And you may, and I don't know what kind of sound system people may be listening on at home, on your headphones or your ear pod things, your brain holes, whatever. But you may notice that second chord change does feel much smoother, just by virtue of that little thing there. And we have not taken away from this whole idea. Let me listen to that again, just see if that sounds too harsh. And I do hear a little bit of dissonance between that, but to me, it's an acceptable dissonance. It's kind of working. And now I kind of want to do the same thing for this first chord. And it's a good idea to be able to analyze your chords the way I'm doing here and say, well, look, if I change this note, what does it become relative to my chord that it's sitting in? So this one would be kind of considered a suspension. We are suspending this chord out. And technically, this may not be a suspension. A suspension is normally with a major 2 or a perfect 4. I mean, we are suspending in 2. And you can suspend other numbers, but just the idea is we're suspending this part of this chord out into the next chord. So we really get the full effect of this chord here, which is kind of cool. So we can ask ourselves, how much do we want to move? So in a case like this, we've got, a third that we move down to here, from here to here. That's a third. These next to the violin 2 and the violas, these only move by a second. So this would be a smaller move. Now in this case, let's see. What do I got this? Okay, so this is the 3 here. This is the 5. This is the root. So if I were to take this and maybe do something like this, that would now be a 7 on this. So we would have an F minor 7 chord. And then I could go down to the 6, tie that across, and again, may or may not work. That's actually kind of cool on its own. Let's listen to it with the ensemble. Kind of liking that. Kind of liking that quite a bit, actually. And now, so yeah, and I am saving this as I go along. I know I like to remind people, if you're going to do this stuff, save often. Do not learn the hard way about how you should save often. I have made that mistake. It's not fun. If you need to work on just having, more cussing in your own life, feel free to make the mistake. I'm going to urge against it, but that's just me. You do your own thing. Now here too, it's worth noting that when you do something like this, if we're on a root and a 5, so I've brought this down to the 6 at this point. So at this point we had, so initially we have our F minor chord, Then we add in the 7. So briefly we have an F minor 7. And now we have the 6. This is also going to stand as an interval of a second against this. And in this case, this would be a minor second off of the 5. So again, a little bit of dissonance, but we're only hearing that dissonance for an 8th note. And I don't think it's a bad dissonance here. So we got a couple of minor seconds in there. You know, we got one here briefly for a dotted quarter note. We've got one here for an 8th note. No big deal. Dissonances can really help push things forward. When I'm teaching music, I always try to avoid words like good and bad, because music or a chord or a sound, like, you know, should I use an organ or a string section? Should I use brasses or winds? Neither of them is good or bad. It's all based on context. If your context is no good, or I should say, if your music doesn't meet the context for which you're creating it, that's when you can run into a problem. Okay, so we're back to this F chord here. And what I'm kind of feeling is that when I hit beat 1 here, as I'm listening to this with the ensemble, I feel like it should change the chord. Now, there's nothing wrong with that ringing out, and I kind of like the whole note here, but I think what I want to do in this case, so right now we're on the C note, which is the 5. I'm going to untie this. I'm going to take this up to the 6 of that F again. And now it's, in this case, it's not going to be clashing with a minor second because I've got my C note here. Where's my other? Oh, I guess I'm taking the 5 completely out in this case. So I'm just moving it up to be a 6. I've established your 5 here. And the 5 is, well, one, it's represented in the guitars because I'm using power chords. So cool. But also, generally, when we are creating chords, the 5 will be the first note that we just dump right out. It's one of the least important notes in a chord because it really just kind of serves to, it's kind of a yes man to the root, is really what the 5 is. It's great in electric guitars to provide a foundation. So if I'm hitting this F chord, if I just hit that as a note, versus if I hit the 5 with it, it's almost kind of adds a bit of stability to the root. But in a chord in general, if you dump the 5, it's not a big deal. So basically we're dumping out the 5, so we got 1, 1, 3, and 6 now. And this is I'm kind of digging this. So that's working pretty well if we listen to this just as the string section. And now there again, if I were writing this to be a string section alone, going right back to this note probably wouldn't work for me that well. And this is worth considering when you are writing even to back up an ensemble, is I might think, hey, I'm not quite ready to hear that D flat note again yet. What if I made this a 7 and then brought it into the 6? And that 7, the 7 is a very colorful note in a chord, in my opinion. Some people don't like 7 chords. Some people don't like 9 chords. I don't really have an interval that I just strictly dislike. It's like, oh, I'll never use blah. I like them all. And again, it comes down to context. How are we using these? So I like that a little better on its own. Let's see if I like it better in the ensemble setting. Yeah, that's not bad. And I have saved this again. So let's continue to move forward. Now, one thing we got here is there are no rests in this. And there's nothing wrong with that, particularly since I am using this as a pad element. If I start to, what I think of as punctuate this by adding in a lot of extraneous whatever, like rests and staccato notes, Sometimes it can bring it kind of rhythmically more to the forefront. Again, context, context, context. Is this appropriate for the song that you are creating? That's really the only question you ever need to ask. I haven't decided yet if I want to do that, but I'm kind of feeling like, particularly here, I think I'm probably going to put in some staccato information. I almost feel like taking this to an eighth note and then jumping back into a chord could be good. If I end up being wrong, I end up being wrong. But also for illustrative purposes, this could be kind of useful. So what is our chord here? It looks like we've got an A chord here. Is that A flat? No. Oh, okay, I see what's happening. So what we've got is a C add flat 6. We don't have a 3 or a 5, so we just have the 1 and the flat 6. So this is basically a minor 6 chord. But the reason I'm thinking A is because this is an inversion, and this is what was in the bass. I put that in. So this is an inverted A minor dyad. Sorry, A major dyad. A flat major dyad. Get your key signature straight, Randy. So we got an A flat major dyad, and when you invert a 3, it becomes a 6. When you invert a major, it becomes a minor. So here we have a minor 6 or a major third. Because of what I did in the bass, we're kind of reinforcing that. And so now I could choose very easily to say, okay, well, let's go more after the C in this case, which would make it the C with the 6. So if I make C, E flat, and G here, this is going to be a C minor chord, and then that 6 would be acting very much like a 6. If I make this an A flat, a C, and an E flat, we're going to have an A flat major chord, and we're going to be reinforcing the A flat major part of those notes on the guitar. So that, and something like this, even though it's just going to be a little eighth note, and this whole chord only lasts for a quarter note anyway, we can really do a lot to shape how this music feels in this case. Now, because of the way I generally use these chords, I like to think of this in a case like this as being the C. So that is what I wish. Yes, I want to actually reinforce the C note here. And so I can put that all the way down there. So that's a C. Can put this. Now, here again, this is where I kind of ask myself the question, how much do I want this chord to stand out? So I'm doing not a huge jump here, a jump of a fourth, which is fine. So we've got our C, we've got our G, we're going to need an E, and then we're going to need a repeated note. Now, again, very rough. So like I said, we don't typically repeat our 3s and 5s. We're likely to go after a repetition of the root, which is usually fairly easy to accomplish. So if this is, you know what, this is not a good place to talk about what I was going to talk about. I was thinking my brain was in the wrong arena. I was back on the A flat major. So scratch that. So basically, if that's there, now here's where we kind of got decision time, because if I were to take this down to an E here, even down to a G, so now we would be repeating the 5, but also these are an octave apart. And often it's better to have more separation in your lower voices and lesser separation in your upper voices. Now, if I take this all the way up to an E here, then I have a very big jump here. And again, none of these are right or wrong. And if it sounds good, it is good. But I'm also crossing from here. I'm kind of passing up where I just was And it's not necessarily a voice crossing, but it's something that we don't generally like. So I could put this, so here if I put it on a C, I'm moving up a fifth, I'm not crossing over this. So this is a little better, and then I just have to put this one on an E. And that's not bad. Now, let's take a listen to how this sounds. That's not bad. And what I'm hoping that this will do is that inside the ensemble, this will kind of punctuate this beat one here by pausing. So that's kind of what we're going after there. And now, here, and this is where this orchestration can really, it can be very time consuming. It can be kind of, I don't necessarily want to say complex, but it has a lot of options. I say it's not terribly complex because we're really working mostly with just triads. We've had a couple of 2s and 9s, we had a 7 and a 6. But for the most part, we're working with triads and we're working around triads. And you notice here, I haven't put in any chromatic alterations. There are no accidentals in here. But if I were to feel that this was maybe being a little too much by jumping up to that high note, maybe I kind of want to, I kind of went downward in my first measure, kind of started bringing it back down. Maybe I want to bring that downward slope. So I could put that on a C, maybe bring this down to a G. Now, these move stepwise being just one position at a time. This moves stepwise. These two both move down. Oh, now that I'm in a sticky situation here because I just realized I have a fourth here. Wait a minute, do I? Wait a minute, what do I have? No, I've got parallel octaves there. Okay. So yeah, I need to revoice this anyway because I didn't. So basically I go from an A flat. No, because those are not octaves. I'm not great at reading my viola line. I will admit that. And then it's funny, I'll get on a lesson with someone like Susan, who often writes choral parts for a lot of all-female choirs. And so she'll write soprano, soprano, alto, alto for the choirs, what we call SSAA. And I'll be thinking of viola clef and a bass clef just because I'm accustomed to looking at, I write strings a lot more than she does. And so I kind of got to reorient my brain when I'm looking at these. Okay, so I'm on an A flat and I'm on an F. That's okay. Okay, no, we're good there because those are thirds. So that works. That is also a third. It's because that is, let's see, C and E flat. So that is a minor third. So we're good there. Cool. So this now, it may just make it so that this is a little less abrupt when we go to this chord. Absolutely. Let's hear that with the ensemble. Yeah, I like that. And like I said, I kind of think of this, the word I like to use is punctuate. We're just kind of punctuating this hit on the strings and making that kind of stand out a little more. So we're drawing a little more attention to the actual strings in this case. And now, of course, when it comes to the mixing of the album, well, that's, we can do a lot in there to decide how much attention we're going to draw just by how loud or quiet we make them, how we EQ the strings, how they relate to the other instruments. All of those things come into play. But renowned engineers will tell you that a good mix starts with a good composition. If you have a crap song, it doesn't matter how good the mix is, it's still just a crap song. See the band Poison for a reference. Okay, so now we're on this G chord here. G flat, key signature. Key signature, and you've got G flat here. So now, one thing we could do is, it's notable that you can get away with much more movement in your bass position. So I could take something like this. Let's just do this experimentally. I can move that up to the 3 right there. And so now we've actually got movement by a 7th. Now, another notable thing, this is different for different composers and their thought processes. Some people will say it's okay to have a parallel 5th if there's a rest in between. And I'm kind of right down the middle on that. I'm totally neutral. If people have parallel 5ths there, cool. If not, no worries. Yeah. So not a big deal to me one way or the other. So if I put a 3rd here, and I've put a 3rd on the bottom of this, I have repeated my 3rd. And this is not a hard, fast rule, but this is one of the places where if you're going to repeat a 3rd or a 5th, if that's going to be a repetition note, one of the things that I've found as a general guideline is do it in the outside voices. And sometimes you look up these rules and they're kind of made to be more complex than they probably need to be. And that's kind of what I garnered out of it is if you're gonna have your repetition note be your 3rd or your 5th, do it in your outside voices. And of course, always check this against how it actually sounds. So I may put this one on as 5. So now we've got 3s, the 3rds on the outside, root on violin 2, and 5 on the viola. And let's check that in context. Yeah, that works fine for me. I'm good with that. And now, of course, this jumps way back up. And let's say we do want to get to a higher position here. We want to kind of work back up. We don't necessarily have to jump there. So here we are back on an F note. And this, this guitar riff throughout is largely on, this is all F right here. Comes back to an F chord here. This is ultimately still part of the F chord, so we're basically an F chord to here. And this is so transient, you can almost say that this is almost all F. And so we're kind of, the orchestration down here is either reinforcing that or in this case, reinforcing that we want it to be something else. So a lot of F going on. And so when, here I might say, okay, I'm kind of tired of this being so much F. Let's consider the F suddenly to be the 5. So let's turn this into a B flat now. And now here, in this case, I already had a B flat. Cool. I can tie that across. Like we pointed out, we often like to tie at least one note across during a chord change. Now I will note that here I intentionally made this a block chord because I wanted that to punctuate. I wanted it to stand out a bit. That was on purpose. I didn't need to hold one of those notes over. And in fact, if I had ended up putting this note, say here, I may have not tied it across just so that, again, if it were being played by humans, but even though it's played on a computer, same thing, it will be, the bow will hit there. It'll have an attack. So we want that chord to stand. So sometimes you don't want that. But here, yeah, okay, cool. We got this thing going on. We'll tie that across. And so that can help smooth things out. So we're going for a B flat now. So our notes are going to be B flat, D flat, and F. B flat minor. B flat, D flat, and F is what we're going after here. B flat, D flat, and F. So here is our B flat. So that's a root. We've already got our F's in place. So that's the 5. So these are already that. So I can bring this down to be a D flat here. So there's my 3. Move one of these to be an F. Sorry, to be a B flat again. And so that would take it too low in a case like this. We're out of range. So I could move that up. And now I may decide that that's too big of a jump. Or, you know, so we kind of got some oblique motion, some contrary motion going on in here. But we do start moving ourselves back up. Let me this might work better to take that to a B flat and leave this on an F, just because we have a little more smooth motion now. And we kind of had all these, you know, these were working contrary, these were working oblique. So now it's just, these are all moving up. This is moving straight across, just oblique motion. Cool. That might work a little better. And I do like that better, absolutely. Also, it's good to listen just with the string section. Yeah, I think that's a little more pleasant move there. Okay, and now we've got this guy. So here we've got a C chord. Definitely not going to want that to jump all the way up there. Just because, you know, and sometimes you may want to really just make a big jump, and that will really allow whatever element that is, if it's an organ, a string section, whatever, that will have that stand out. And we'll even see that happening on a guitar solo. You know, you might start, if we're in this F Phrygian and you've got your rhythm guitar down, doing something like this, and you start to do your solo down here. And then all of a sudden you jump way up, and that's going to stand out all of a sudden over that where you just were, and kind of really draw attention to that. So those big jumps can be very beneficial like that, but it's not what I'm looking for in a composition of this nature. So again, bigger jumps in the bass, those aren't going to stand out like that. But a big jump in the soprano totally would. So this note's going to end up coming down to, so we're on a C. So I've got that on the root. Maybe take this down to the 5, take this down to the 3. And again, now we've got a fairly decent little movement here. We've got our root notes, our repeated notes on the outside. We've got our 1, 3, 5 there. Probably good like that. Now here, again, we kind of want to ask that question, is this a place, I've got my note holding over here, do I want one of these notes to hold over? Because I could take something like this, hold all these across, and now that would just very briefly, it would be a 7. And then what I would probably do is just put a dotted half note in there. Absolutely. I'm just going to roll with that. I'm just going to let that one note go straight across. And then I might even tie this over, boom, to the next measure. To this B flat note here. And now, so I've got my, so this is kind of cool. So I took that F chord and I kind of forced it into a B flat context. And now we got a B flat coming. So we're almost like this, we're kind of pushing us in the direction of feeling this B flat coming. We're kind of anticipating the idea that a B flat's coming up. That was not my intent at the time. I didn't even look at this to see there was a B flat coming up. But we could also play with this in a different way and again say, okay, well in this case, what if the B flat's not the 1? I'm getting a little too warm here. So if the B flat's not the 1, then what else can we do with it? We say, okay, well maybe the G flat could be the 1, and that would make the B flat the 3, which would be a G flat major. We could also make the B flat be the 5, which would make an E flat the 1. And in that case, we would end up with an E flat, G flat, and B flat. And we would have an E flat minor chord. So we haven't really represented an E flat in here yet. So let's try that. So I can still leave this down on the bottom here. That's fine. We don't have to have the root note on the bottom. Maybe bring this down to the E flat. So we're going for the E flat, G flat, B flat. B flat has been represented as a 5. This is now a 1. Take this to a G flat, and then I could also tie this across. Nothing wrong with tying more than one note across. And so that is my G flat, B flat, E flat, and I will probably want to duplicate my E flat there, because that's the 1. And again, generally speaking, doesn't have to be. But we kind of want to look for, do we have a reasonable set of movements here? And this, this is a movement by a 4th. That's not that big. That's not a huge deal. That actually works pretty well. I kind of want to hear this in context. Yeah, it's kind of nice. And now here, and when we look at this, we have that chord does just ring out for an entire measure. Oops, and then gets lost because we don't know what we're doing. Let's find that again. There we are. So, there again, we can ask, what do we want our pad to do? Do we want it to back this up? Or maybe we can put a little rhythmic information in. Now, depending on the type of pad you're using as well, if you're using some sort of like a synth sound that maybe doesn't have very much of an attack. An attack would be, so if something with, so if I just kind of swell in, you don't really feel that note starting. Where if I hit that note with a pick, so that's the attack, how the note starts. So if you're using a synthesizer that maybe has a very soft attack, it could be hard to get any rhythmic information in here. But we can take something like this and say, so I know I want to have some kind of punctuated stuff going on here. So maybe I'm going to prep for that. And maybe I only need to do something in just one instrument for this. So maybe you do 2, but let's take this. And maybe we're going to take this violin here. And we'll say, okay, let's do a little bit of a run of just maybe some 16th notes and 8th notes. And here we can kind of think of this as a little bit of a melody. And when you're a vocalist, often vocalists, even if they're not aware of it, will work around a 1-3-5 very strongly. But a lot of times they'll just run right through the notes. And so something like this, we might just take and just make a little melodic line here like this. Right? Now, that 16th note might be a bit much in this case, so maybe just if we listen to that in context, that can work. And now, hit the same note here and here. Good, bad, indifferent. Indifferent, in my opinion. But if we didn't want that, then we might take boom. And just move that by 1. Nothing wrong with that. There are no, again, these aren't rules. There are no rules here. And depending on what I decide to do next, I may come back and change one or more of these notes back to where they were or into a different position. Always being willing to go back, redo something. Don't become emotionally attached to a note, because it's just a note. Not worth it. All right. So now, one of the things I'm kind of feeling here, I see if I take this down to the 5, I'd have this nice little line going up. And I could just leave those both on the root. And then I could do something here. I could take that to the 5. And again, have a nice little line going up turn these into eighth notes, turn these into eighth notes. I want to make these all staccato. And that's that little dot. That means play it short. So it's almost like having, you can kind of think of it as being similar to this. It's just a 16th note rest. And generally, musicians will put a little more emphasis on a staccato note than they will a note with a rest. As quickly as this is going by, it really doesn't make much of a difference. And I should say, as quickly as it's going by, and the fact that this is just there to support a heavy metal ensemble, doesn't make much of a difference. This is quite a bit nicer on paper than having all of those rests. So this could be a pretty good way to do it. Have to load the sounds up there, which can take a moment sometimes. So you can hear that, how it's that staccato nature of it. If I take those staccato dots back off and play the same thing, put the staccatos back in. Yeah, and that's the feel I think I want in this part of this bit here. And so I've taken these both down to a 5, and I feel like that particular kind of upward line is going to work. So now I don't want to modify the soprano voice at all, the violin 1. So I've got a 5 here. If I take this to a 3, I'll be good there. Now I've got a root there. 1. Could take that to the 3. Take that to the 5. I'm not crossing voices here. Good. Take this to the 3, and now I've got a decent little contrary motion. Repetition notes are on the outside. And now, let's see, I took this to the 5. Take that to the 5, so that's moving down. Take this to the 3 and leave this on the root. Yeah, that could work. Okay. Yeah, that's not bad. That's coming along. Okay. And again, we'll have to listen to this in context with the full ensemble as well. And I'm just saving the crap out of this because at any point my electricity could go out, the internet, well, I guess if the internet drops, you would lose it, but I wouldn't. The program could freeze. Lots of things can happen, and I have certainly had those things happen more than once. Don't want them to happen and cause me to lose all of my work. Even though certainly I'm going to have to do this work over, but I'm kind of pleased with what I've got here. So let's just not have to do it all over again. So again, now here, hypothetically, I could just work this. I could put them all in the same, and I might accidentally end up doing that. So I've got a 5. Let's move this one to the 3. And so now I've got my repetition root notes here. Cool, let's move this to the 5. Move this to the 3. And now my repetition notes are on the outside. I'm going to root there. So that was a 3. Let's see. Something like that. And that's pretty close to what I had done on the first triplet. I think that kind of works. I want to hear that in situ, as it were. Yes, digging this. This is going to be a fun song. I mean, it's titled Sailing on an Ocean of Blood. How could that not be fun? All right. So now what do we got here? We got some sort of a G chord going on, it looks like. No, F. Sometimes I can tell we're in F. That is not a G. That is an F. Okay. And this... I think it's pretty reasonable. This is the one where basically this whole measure between the guitar and the bass is just building up a full F minor chord. And So here, it might be a good idea just to kind of reinforce, put that on the 3, put that on the 5, and just reinforce that root. Sometimes that's exactly what you want. And I just realized I had illustratively dropped this down one. And I think that's good because if I left this where it was, I'd be repeating that note. Nothing wrong with repeated notes, but this kind of, will give a little, is the 7 to its 1. So that kind of pushes in the right, and it's very brief. I mean, we're going along at a pretty good clip here. But still, the ear does pick up on these little things, and it works nicely. I want to hear this again. And actually now, so I think this chord I'm going to stick with, but I'm kind of feeling things rhythmically here. So if I turn these into some 8th notes, oops. Actually, what I'm going to do a repetition here, and then I'm going to turn this and this will, oops, that didn't work right. Oh, I see what I did. This will be a bit of a syncopation. So I'm going to put that in. And now just listen to what this does rhythmically. I'll play it both ways here, with and without the ensemble. And that is a rhythm that I use a lot in my music. And here, now something like this, let's hear this with the ensemble. I'm liking that a lot. But here too, this is something, again, the rock ensemble is just doing an F minor chord. That's all that's going on. You can take something like this and work against this. And a good way to do this is just move your upper 3 voices down 1 position, your lower voice up 1 position. And now we will have an E, a G, an A, and another G. G flat, A flat, E flat. So this is not a triad, but that's okay. We don't always have to have a 1, 3, 5. But this can add just a little bit of kind of movement, a little bit of interest against that A chord in the upper ensemble. And rhythmically, I like it in this position. This is something worth experimenting with. It's like, try it here. Try it here. Put these in different places. Maybe even maybe you leave that chord where it was, and you put another chord on these rests, and you make it that. A lot of things you can do. Again, none of these are right or wrong propositions. And I could even try something. I could put another chord here and reorganize it in some other way. I don't really want to, but yeah, all of these things can totally happen. So yeah, I am really digging this. I have saved it a bunch. And I heard, as it popped over here to all these octaves, I liked the way this was moving up to the B note. So I'm kind of liking this upper note staying fairly high here. This is good. So I may leave those in place or close to it. And let's see what else was now. These, I think I'm going to go with a staccato feel. Not going to go staccato on these. So now here, even though this doesn't tie across because this is staccato, there's basically a rest after it. You can do nothing wrong with saying, okay, let's put that same note there. So that would be the 3. Maybe move this down to the 5. And now our repeated notes are on top. Now here, you might ask yourself this question: do I want to do this? Do I want to put these an octave apart? One reason that you may want to put them further apart is, as I said, I like the way this stands out by moving to these higher notes. And when you have greater separation between the notes, particularly in your upper voices, it will draw attention to that element. So we're going to hear the strings coming out more, not just as a result of it moving to a higher position, but also as a result of it being further apart. However, it's worth experimenting with maybe moving this to the 3, this to the 5, and then bringing this back to the root, and see if that doesn't work a little better. I think it might. I want to hear that just on its own. Yeah, it goes by pretty quick, but I think I'm going to leave it that way. And again, I'm less concerned with the tying over the notes since, again, essentially this has a very short rest after it because it's played staccato, it's played short. I do think I'm going to want to leave that one there. Maybe try bringing that down to the 5 here. And 1, because that's a root, 3, leave that on the 1. And here, because I'm moving up and I'm moving down, yeah, there's going to be more separation between the notes. This is going to happen when you revoice chords. I don't know exactly what these, every once in a while on Nemo.tv, there'll be like this picture come up on the chat. That one was a really cool dragon. I don't know what those pictures mean. It just says that so-and-so is entering the chat, but I gotta say they look really cool. So, however that's happening, those are pretty awesome pictures. And that yellow dragon was a really cool one there. So where are we at here? What do we got? So we're gonna get into, let's listen to this and see if that's working. Yeah, I'm good with that. And what do we got here? This is a root and... oh, is that a... okay, we got a B flat, we got a D. Okay, so that's the 3, and that's... and we put the 5 on the bottom. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could tie those across. And here I do have a block chord. I could go back and rectify that. Don't necessarily have to. Tie those across there. So this gives me a 5. I could put my 3 here, tie those across as well. And so that's probably going to work pretty well. Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm just kind of wondering if I were to put this on 7. That's actually pretty colorful like that. How does that sound in situ here? Yeah. And let's see, we got a root on top. This one is the 5 and the 3. Take that to the 3. Maybe take this to a 2 and tie it across. And then ultimately here, I should do this a little bit differently. Because what I should have is probably something more like this. Oh, nope, not that. Yes, that. Again, so we see right where that half is at there. That's a little cleaner. And that measure should work. And yeah, I'm glad I left that kind of up above there on those roots. And I feel like this root is working for me. Hold that across. Now this, okay, so that's a 5. And then I could go to the 3 here and hold that across as well. Yeah. Good with this. And now we're back to a G flat. And what do we got going? Oh, you know what? I just realized that we have just actually reached. Apologies. This may or may not hold across because this is where it starts over. Boom. So we just finished that section. So now listen to what happens when we play through. I'm gonna go from here. So this is the blue part is what we have just orchestrated. The unhighlighted part is where it's just octaves again. And so this is what we started with. And we'll hear this massive difference when we'll listen to these 8 measures, and then we're gonna listen to it just go straight through for a bit to where they're all playing the same note. And we're gonna hear this absurd difference. And so all of a sudden, that's just so uninteresting there. And now if we were to listen to this in the ensemble format, again, it would act as a pad. It would work just fine. But if we go back here and we listen to it with the more interesting stuff we've written, it's, again, in my opinion, much more interesting. This works, I think, a lot better. And, some people may prefer just the straight octaves there, and there'd be nothing wrong with that. Some people may say there's something wrong with it. Those people can shut up because, again, no right or wrong answers. So I will tie this one across for the start over point. And I've been saving this a lot. So now we pull our navigator back up and we see that we've got an A section over here. We've got an A section here and here and here. And since those are all just, basically the same A section, I will take this same information we just did and just pop it in there. And I tend to do just exactly that. Just copy paste. We're playing that section again. The guitars are written to be the same. The leads will be different because those will be improvised. But overall, I'm just going to leave the orchestration the same because that's what that section is doing. If I were to want to, or some other composer were to want to do a different orchestration on each iteration of the A section or the B section or whatever, again, nothing wrong with that. I think this works well, but it is kind of fun also, I gotta say, watching your sections get suddenly filled in. It's like, we just wrote a lot of music there. That's pretty cool. I'm kind of digging that. Okay, so we've got our A section much better taken care of at this point. And I'm kind of wanting to jump up now. I'm going to show all of our stuff again. I think it was the E section. Yeah, right here. So this is where we had brought in our harpsichord for this break. And for those who may have happened to be watching while I did this, I have made one change. This was just a single note, and it was here. So this is what I originally had, and I've just changed that to be a chord, and I put it up there. And it is a fourth, but whatever. I liked it, so I'm rolling with it. But I think what I want to do here on this E section is I want to introduce the harpsichord. And so let's smallerize this. And generally what I do, and this is one nice thing in Sibelius, is it's very easy to just focus in on only the stabs you want to be working with. I don't need the string stabs up anymore. I don't need the piano or any of the stuff that doesn't have information in it. So just focus in on just the part that you actually want to be working with and start working that. So here, we're basically, I want the ear to be prepped for the harpsichord by the time this happens. I feel like going from just rock ensemble straight into the harpsichord interlude is a little harsh. Now, I could in production absolutely find ways to make that work a little better. So there's two things I can kind of do here. One, I could just go back a few measures and just say, okay, let me just kind of bring the harpsichord in here and get a little busier as we go along. Or I could write something for the whole section and work it that way. And I'm kind of feeling like I think I do want the harpsichord going through this, though not as busy as it is in that interlude. So what do we got here? We're in B flat minor, and this is where I felt like the way I'd written this, it doesn't really necessarily lend itself real strongly to a particular tonal center, but I could anchor that more with the actual harpsichord. And again, now because I already have some instruments in here, I do want to pay credence to what's already there. So if I was just to start taking this and putting notes in some hodgepodge format, it might end up kind of clashing with what we've got. And you might think, well, harpsichord clashing, a harpsichord kind of has a clashing type of a sound already. That's true, it does. It's a very forward sounding instrument. But yeah, that's part of the game. I'm just going to take a quick look at something. I want to make sure that all of these are still running. Okay, it looks like one of the Facebooks and Nono are not actually live. Totally okay. And I'm not sure quite how those things work out. Nonetheless, whatever. Cool. So yeah, and again, let me just, take a quick little thing here. If you're new to what we do here, I'm the Mad Poet. You are an audience. We are the Mad Poet Society. Today we're working on a composition stream. We're composing a piece called Sailing Upon an Ocean of Blood. This song is going to be the closing song on my 70th album. I just released my 66th album about a week and a half ago. Currently working on albums 67 through 70. And I do have some other compositions that are complete and in progress, but don't know where they will end up going. My 67th album is going to have a song that's 33 minutes, 33 seconds long. It's a tribute to a former mentor of mine who passed a few years ago. My 68th album will only have one song, will be 52 minutes, 25 seconds long. That happens on every 17th album, which I call the Asemic Writings series. Those are always one song that's 52 minutes, 25 seconds. My 69th album, I'm also prepping a 15 to 20 minute song in it that will have vocals. They may only be spoken word. There may be a little bit of singing on that. Time will tell. And when that album will be titled Pink, and I will be doing the release show for that in drag. So those are the upcoming things. This is not my standard type of stream. More commonly, I do a concert style stream. Back behind me here, I've set my office up more as a performance space. I've got some stage lights back there that flash around, and we shoot smoke in a room, and it's a lot of fun. So certainly if you are new to what we're doing, feel free to come back and check out some of my other stuff. I am planning another kitchen stream in the near future. I need to make some chocolate chip cookies and send off to my daughter who's out of state, being a grown-up and doing adult stuff, because that's what happens when you're old, like me. So that's kind of what's going on here, and hopefully you are enjoying what you see. If you are a music theory nerd, then maybe you'll be getting a few things out of the stuff that we're doing here today with our composition stream. I was planning to do more of a concert style stream today, but when I started up, my hands were so cold, I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to play guitar very well. So I just moved over to a composition thing and called it good. So we had written, about 3 days ago, we were doing a composition stream. We'd written this little this E section of this song that we're seeing here, and this little break, this interlude thing with this harpsichord. So now I'm just prepping that harpsichord, prepping our ears for the harpsichord by bringing it in here. And so again, a lot of times, just kind of bringing in, like, what are my root notes, you know? So in this case, root note is a B flat, and then so this is kind of interesting. We basically switch our root notes from a B flat. So this can absolutely be reflected in this part of the composition. We basically switch our root notes in this chord, even though the guitar doesn't do much. We have set this up to move from a B flat to a G flat. Is that correct? No, to an F. A B flat chord to an F chord. Oops. So I'm going to kind of just prep that. And I think reinforcing that in the harpsichord could be good. So let me take that to an actual F there. And again, just kind of getting some information in so you know what your basic chord changes are. Now this whole thing is basically set up to be a G flat chord here. And then we move back to an F chord here. And on this, we've got this here, we're moving to a G flat, and I've reinforced that with the B flat note as its third. So yeah, put that back on the G flat. Kind of laying out our chord structure. Here we have a C, and then we move to a D flat. Then we're moving here back to an E flat. And these positions can absolutely change in a bit. And then this last few measures, I kind of take a little bit of out of key information. So basically we're using a D natural to a D flat to a D natural to a D flat to a C. And that, I just kind of liked the feel of that. And now this one here also could have been very easily interpreted to the ear as an F power chord, which is why I actually put in this E flat, because that's going to help kind of reinforce the idea that it's a C. Because if this were an F, that would be like a 7, but relative to the C, it's going to be a third. And that's going to be a little more strong kind of push to the ear to say, we actually want you to hear the C as the root rather than the F as the root. And it's cool how with music theory concepts, you can really do a lot to manipulate the ear. One thing I like to say to my students is, your job as a musician is, it almost sounds like some real bad, like junior high kind of thing. Your job is to manipulate people emotionally. That's what we do as musicians. And if you think about soundtrack music for your favorite films, I mean, often you won't even realize if a scene in a movie brings you to tears, the music probably had a lot to do with that. Or if you go to another example, the original Conan the Barbarian movie, scored by Basil Paladris. Brilliant score. If you watch that movie, and when you get to parts where they're just kind of like panning across the desert, you'd be like, this would be really boring if it weren't for the music. You know, some of that stuff wouldn't work at all if Basil had not done such a brilliant job of getting that music in just to be just the right kind of feel. I mean, when you're done watching that movie, you're like, yeah, I want to be a barbarian. Give me a sword. Let's go fight. And for most of us, that would be a really bad idea. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just illustrating that the music does help push us in a particular direction. All right, so now we've got just a really, really basic layout for our harpsichord. And now rhythmically, this could do a lot. So if we listen to our rock ensemble, it's, you know, a lot of these chords are kind of being held out. We're letting the drums kind of drive things, and the guitars are just kind of going along for the ride. Nothing crazy. Sounds good. I like the basic idea. But now we can say, okay, how do we want to maybe fill things in? If we were to take these notes up a bit higher so we actually hear them, and let's just see what that harpsichord is starting to add. Kind of reinforcing what's going on there. But definitely, I've talked before about the concept of audiation, which can happen a few different ways. If you have your favorite song stuck in your head, or maybe you're preferably not, maybe you get your least favorite song stuck in your head, that's audiation. You're hearing it in your head without actual outside audio input. And you can hear the melodies and the harmonies and the rhythm and everything going on in these songs when you're just hearing them in your head. And maybe it's off of some stupid television commercial for soda pop or laundry detergent, or maybe it's, you know, the song that you were listening to when you were working out. So that's one type of audiation, is hearing something you already know. But another type of audiation is basically using this same concept to say, what should be in place here? What do I hear coming next? And that's kind of a big one. Being able to do that is very powerful as a composer. So I'm definitely I'm hearing this. I feel like what I'm hearing with my audiation is I want to start to anticipate some of these chord changes with the harpsichord. So here we've got B flat. So I'm feeling if we were to do something like this, and we're going from a B flat to an F. So the F is going to be here. Now I mentioned before, last week when I was doing this, that I recognize that your harpsichord, generally speaking, did not have a sustain pedal. And I often put the sustain pedal in. This little bit of code that I'm writing is a MIDI control code, often just referred to as a CC code. And I'm putting in, let's blow up on this, MIDI control code 64 with a value of 127. There are a bunch of different MIDI control codes. There are 128 of them, 0 through 127. There might actually be a few others that are standalones. And certain of those control codes have their own specific thing that has been assigned. So control code 64 equates to the sustain pedal on a keyboard. So like if you have a MIDI keyboard and it's got a little sustain pedal with it, when you push that pedal down, it is bumping the value to 64 or higher. Basically on that, it's an on-off. So 64 to 127 is on, 0 to 63 is off. And so probably it just takes it to 127. And when you let off of that, it takes it back to below 64 and turns it off. So basically what I've done is I've just told this system, turn on a sustain pedal at this point for MIDI purposes. So now, like this, if we just listen to this, let me take this out. Listen to how when we get to this note, everything will just stop afterward. It did not stop. Somewhere I've already got, oh, because I put the control code in back here already. Let me take that one out and illustrate this properly. Cool. If I put the control code back in, then it will ring again. And I just realized, of course, I don't have to put this MIDI control code in this place because I do have one in advance of it already. So I can just take these back out, but that's how MIDI control codes work. Well, it's that, I should say that's how that particular MIDI control code works. There are a lot of others. So now I've really just set this up for purposes of rhythm right now. This is the kind of rhythm I feel like my brain is hearing. So we're on a B flat chord at this point, moving to an F chord. So I could very easily say, well, let's go on to the 3 of this. And now B flat, the F is the 5. So we're moving by a 5th. So right here, I've laid out a B flat triad. And I'm kind of liking that. However, I don't really like the F the way it's hitting here. I think I do want an octave of the F here. I think I'm actually going to put the 5 here. We're still on the B flat chord. And now I'm going to try putting the 7 here. That I like a lot better. And yeah, where you put these chords, what we call the voicing of where we put the notes, what we call the voicing of a chord, can be a very big deal. So sometimes you want the root note on top. Sometimes you specifically want the root note not to be on top. And now here, so the 7 I'm really liking. I kind of want to put in the 3 of the chord. And I think I want to put that down below. So now we're going to have the 1 down here is doubled. We have the 3 is now when the 1 is doubled. I'm not working with 4-part writing rules anymore. When we were doing that string section earlier, we were working with 4-part writing guidelines, and I was not using them super strictly because I don't have to. Even I would tend to be a little more cognizant of what my part writing rules are if I were writing something just for an orchestra. Like I did one film preview that I think it was just for a project. I don't think they ever actually made the film. They should have. It was a cool concept. This guy Justin that I've worked with a couple times, and I've done a few things for him. So in that case, it was pretty much just orchestral stuff, synthesized orchestral stuff. I don't have access to an actual orchestra, shamefully. So in that case, I'm a little more cognizant of when I'm changing things around. But when I'm just backing up a rock ensemble, you can be a lot looser with things. Your parallel fifths aren't going to hurt nearly as much, stuff like that. You don't have to be as concerned about it. So definitely the type of project is going to make a difference. That I'm absolutely liking a lot. And now here, I could repeat this same basic idea with hitting the 8th note just before, but I feel like it would actually be a good idea, in my case, to hit 2 8th notes before, because we're hitting the 8th note on the guitar. So this is the and, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So now I want to go 4 and 1. So I'm going to hit the quarter note here. And I feel like I do want the 8th, the and as well. Probably just single notes. I may change that. So this one here is a G flat. Let's go and put that on a G note. So it's there. And again, you can say, okay, well, I've got the 7 of the chord, that's the 6, that's the 5, cool. Or sometimes, like we did in that one little bit on violin 1 a little earlier, you just say, oh, I'm just going to do a run down or a run up or whatever. So or do some sequences, whatever you're going to do. So you don't necessarily have to be overly concerned with how does this relate to the chord. But personally, when I am composing, that's just kind of how I think. How does this relate to the tonic of my scale and to the root of my chord? And I do like this a lot. Sometimes, when you go from chords to single notes, it gets a little lost. I find that the harpsichord sound that I use in my recording program is a little more robust than this sample here. And that's one, I used to use a program called Dimension Pro back from my Sonar days. And I ended up taking the piano and the harpsichord out of those and turning them into a sound font. And so I just kind of have my own, because I've never found a better piano or harpsichord for this heavy metal stuff. On my 55th album, I did use the Vercillion harpsichord, which I think it's like a $10 plug-in. And that worked really well. I found on that one, though, I had to take basically the left hand and the right hand, do them separately and adjust the volumes, because the left hand, the low notes, tended to get a little bit buried in the mix, and the high notes came out really well. So I had a little more work on that one, but that was a really good sounding harpsichord. And yeah, I just haven't found better ones yet. So I'm definitely finding that just compositionally, this gets buried. So let's put this on the 3 here. And again, even here, like, I don't think I have any parallel fifths right now. I might, probably not. But I'm much less concerned about parallel fifths in a case like this. Because, again, I'm not going after strict 4-part writing concepts at all. That is actually working. So this is kind of cool. I hadn't been thinking this, but I noticed when I heard it that these 2 notes are the same. And so it's almost like we're kind of referencing back to the original chord, even though we're on a new chord now. That worked. And I want to see what happens if I go to the 5 here as well. And so this is like a 1-3 of this chord. It's the 3-5 of this chord. So now I definitely want to reinforce this chord with the root a little more strongly, and maybe even take this to the 3, double up that 3. And doubling up the 3 often doesn't do a lot for us, because the 3 is such a powerful note. Just considering what its function is in a chord, determining whether that chord, or even in a scale, determining whether that scale. I got another one of those yellow dragons. Awesome. It determines whether that scale or chord is major or minor. That's what the 3 does. And it does it so well that often duplicating it just is not necessary. Because just one instance of it does a lot. But I think I'm going to leave that double 3 there in this case. I think I'm going to put a little more information on this. I think I'm actually going to put what would happen if I put the 6 here? I'm liking this quite a lot. And now I'm kind of thinking, so again, this is going to be a bit of an experiment. I'm kind of thinking, what if I kind of syncopate the harpsichord to hit in between these up here? So put something like this in. Nope, don't need that much. Okay. And now now here we've got a G flat minor, G flat major chord. So let's go. So we get G. Oh, that's right, because this whole thing is a G flat major chord. So let's put this on the 6, 5, 4. Let's just see what that does. Yes, rhythmically, I'm digging that. And now I'm going to take this and I'm just going to build this outward a little bit to give us a little more motion there. And again, in my recording program, that sound font harpsichord I use, you do hear the left hand quite a bit better, even against the bass and the electric guitars and stuff. So this will be a little more robust at that point. So we've got an A and a C here against a G flat. So the G flat, so the A flat will be a major 9. The C will be a tritone. So we kind of got a diminished chord with a 9 added onto it. Okay, let's roll with it. Digging it. And then here we're going back to an F. So if I go up to the 3, what'll that do? I think I kind of want to move it back downward at this point. And again, and this is something that I urge people, if you are interested at all in any kind of compositional stuff, we got Mush Cube coming in from YouTube. Mush Cube, hello, thanks for coming in. What's happening is I am writing some heavy metal music, writing a song called Sailing Up on an Ocean of Blood. This is going to go on my 70th album. I'm currently working on albums 67, 68, 69, and 70, kind of concurrently. I've got some very interesting stuff going on all of those. This is a song that I had started writing with a couple of students of mine to show them how my composition process works. And it's a really cool piece. It kind of goes all over the place because I wanted to illustrate different kind of concepts that we can put into play along with a composition, and kind of showing them how I tend to do this stuff as it relates to sheet music, which is how I most often do my compositions. Even as a metal artist, I tend to do a lot of composition on sheet music. It's a method that I've found works very well for me. And I've gotten fairly good at it. My very first album, called Confusion, I released in 2004. And that was, written. It was written over a period of about 14 years, from when I first joined the military to when I put it out. And so I, write a riff here, write a riff there, and kind of jam them together. It was just mostly just doing stuff on the guitar, which is very common in a lot of types of rock music. So then I started my second album. I put out in 2019, August 3rd of either 2018 or 2019. And that was where I had started doing a lot more sheet music. I've always found sheet music to be very artistic. I just like the way it looks. I think it's very cool. And so I started writing on sheet music. And then for a period of 11 months, I put out an album a week. And that took me up to my 50th album. And then I kind of slowed down, and then Sarah and I moved out here to Eastern Washington. I had to take a little time off for getting settled. But then put out some albums here and there, and then I had another period of about 2.5 months where I did an album a week. And that is some of my better work. The albums 55 through 64. I was very pleased with that work. And then I actually didn't put an album out for it was actually 2 1/3 years. I think we need to start referring to thirds in years more often, 4 months being a third of a year. If they're going to do 12 months, I'm going to cut it into thirds. All right, so it's 2 1/3 years. And then I put out the album Incomprehensible Isolation, which was my 65th. And that album I was really pleased with. I basically took that 2.5 year period, and I had never really been quite pleased with the production on any of my albums. It was acceptable, but I was never quite there. And on that album, I heard things in there that needed to come out better in the production. So I spent a couple years learning more and more about production, finally got that put out. And then just about a week and a half ago, I put out Schizonoid Paraphrenic, my 66th album. And it's notable that this, the composition streams I do occasionally. I really enjoy these because I kind of feel like a professor up here talking about music theory. And that's something I really enjoy. It doesn't take a whole bunch to get me doing music or talking about music. Not a real tough thing to get me going on. So this is very enjoyable for me. But my more normal streams are more concert oriented. And so this space behind me is both my office and my performance space. You can see my guitars back here. Let me biggerize this view a little. So I got my guitars back there. And what you can't see because it's just too dark, over here and up on the ceiling and over here in a few places, I've got some stage lights. And it would take like 10 minutes to get everything turned on just to show it to you. But feel free to look at some of my back streams. They're all saved on YouTube there where you're coming from. They're also saved on Twitch. And I'm streaming out to about 12 different websites right now. I'm usually 11 to 13 websites. They don't always all work. That's part of the gig though. But yeah, so right now we're working on this 70th album of mine. And we have basically... most of this song has been written for the part that will be played by, actual instruments, drums, bass, guitars. Actually, the drums are synth drums, but I should say the rock instruments had been put in place. And now, earlier I was orchestrating some stuff with a string section under one part of it. And now we're up here, we're just kind of putting this harpsichord section in, because the other day I was on stream and we'd written this little harpsichord interlude. And so now we're basically just prepping the listener's ear for the harpsichord that's going to be coming up. So we're writing a somewhat more sparse harpsichord in this area. And that's what's happening. Thank you for asking. Thanks for coming in. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're getting something out of this if you are a musician or a music theory nerd like myself. Okay, so let's get back to this. We are basically working with... We've got an F chord here. So we've got an F and it's minor 6. And then here we have put in the A flat, which will make this an F minor chord. So the 6 is... Now, inversions, we've talked about inversions a few times. Inversions are great, but yeah, so we basically got this F minor chord. And so this is where, I might think of something like, when I bring these 3 notes down, so I'm ending on the 6, so that could work really well in conjunction with that chord that's being played up there. Or I might want to bring that down to the 5th to reinforce the chord a little more. So I basically have a 1-7-5 or a 1-7-6. Let's hear how the 6 works. Let's hear how the 5 works. Now here, I kind of like the 6 a little better, because the 6, not just because it matches the guitar, but I feel like the 5 in this case, which is a primary chord tone, that we don't really need to have. It's like we talked about earlier, the 5 is one of the most common notes to dump out of a chord. The 6, I feel like it's adding just a little bit of anticipation, and that's good knowing the stuff that's coming up, particularly up here, where we're taking these notes out of key to kind of push us toward that interlude that's coming up. So I feel like basically I'm feeling the 6 on this. And then I think I'm going to want to anticipate this little bit, this little G flat that's coming up on the guitar. And I think what I'm going to actually do here is, let's do a G flat. We'll do a 6 below it, and that is an inverted 3rd. So, and the way I look at this, a good way to look at this is, if that is your 1, the line will be 2, and the next. So basically, you count every space in every line, including the ones your notes are on. So with this, we would be looking at 6 because it's 1, the space is 2, line is 3, space is 4, line is 5, space is 6. That's a sixth apart. If we invert that, it's a third. So I'm basically, just before I give you this G flat on the guitar and bass, I've got a G flat chord there, G flat and B flat, which actually gives us a G flat major chord. I'm also giving you that chord just before we hit it. And then we could, if we're going to really music theory nerd out here, we could say, okay, well, what does this mean to our F chord? So the G is going to be a 2 or a 9. And the way we would count this, if we play an F scale, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's 7 notes in the scale, but sometimes we will count them twice. And when we get to the 15, that's the root again. The 8 is also the root again. So we can call this a 9. This is a flat 9 in this case because we're using a Phrygian mode. And that had the kind of characteristic signature tone of that is that flat 9. So we have this flat 9 chord. The B flat in this case is the 4 of the chord. So we kind of have and that would also be referred to as an 11. So we kind of have this flat 9. It would kind of be like an 11 flat 9 chord. Totally digging it. Totally digging it. Funky. This doesn't have to necessarily relate in a really consonant way to our chord, because it's this quick little thing we just pass over. And and sometimes you may want it to be more drawn out and really clash with your chord. Sometimes it's great to have a chord that really clashes, because that restless nature of it is going to help you move to your next resolution or to your next clashing chord, which may then move to resolution. But the dissonance that we put in music often help us push it forward with a sense of movement. Let's listen to this in context here. I like this. So I'm feeling here. Now, the idea was that I wanted these hitting in between the chords that the guitar is hitting. And that I absolutely got what I wanted, but I feel like if I do it this way, it might be a little more powerful. Maybe I should actually go the other way and put this chord here. Or maybe I should just leave it alone. Sometimes I do get it right the first time, not always. And I may change my mind again on that later. I reserve the right to change my mind up to the point where I publish the song. On certain things, once a guitar is recorded and I'm like, that's good, I usually don't re-record it. I gotta definitely notice something in it for that to happen. But just like, I'm probably not going to go in and recompose a chord at that point. So what do we got here? So we got, this is that chord. Let's do something with this. So I think what I'm going to do here is put in the 6 of the chord. And this is a move I do often in my keyboard stuff. I'll go from the octave to a 6 just inside of that. So basically each of those has moved in contrary motion to the notes that came before it. And so in this case, we're going to have the 1, the 3, and the 6 of this chord, which we also had the 1, 3, and 6 on this chord. So we're just all the way through, we're just using add 6 chords. Totally digging that. That's working for me. And now, again, with the audiation that we've talked about, I feel like this, in the upper line of the harpsichord, should just have a line going down like this. And I just put those notes in. I didn't even think about what the chord was first. So the chord here, we've got a C, and then we're moving to a D flat. So if I put this on the C, that'll go on a B. So B flat, so it'd be like the minor 7 of it. If I put this on the A flat, that is going to be the 5 of the D. So we basically have gone chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone, and then this will be a 4, so non-chord tone. And this, sometimes you hear people in music theory talking about, excuse me, talking about the rhythmic chord function. And this is kind of what they're talking about, is where we put a note or chord rhythmically can have an impact. And I could just as easily have decided to go non-chord tone, chord tone. It would just have a little different feel. And I think I'm almost right here. What I'm going to do is, instead of going straight quarters, I'm going to extend that beat 3 out so that this hits on the and of 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And I like that better for sure. So now we can start to spruce these up a little bit. And again, often, and notice here, the left hand is very much more sparse than the right hand. This is pretty common in a lot of keyboard style music. A lot of times we find if we get too busy with the left hand, it doesn't hit the ear quite right. There's a little too much muddiness. The notes kind of blend together too much. And particularly if we're using bass guitar, electric guitar, double kick on the drums, a lot of information is going to get lost down here. So I'm kind of thinking of the left hand, the lower part in the harpsichord, more as a support type element. And that works pretty well. But it can still be cool to throw a little interest into that left hand. And this is something that, so where was that? No, okay, so we're on the, so having something like this go down, and let me try this without messing everything else up. So this kind of little rhythmic device where I'm going to have the left hand hitting in between the notes on the right hand. So I'm not going to do a whole bunch with the right hand. I'm going to do a little more interest with the left hand. And so let's see. So we've got our C chord here. Let's go to the 5 on that. Now, kind of anticipate. So here's the question I want to say: do I want to work with the C chord or the D flat chord? In this case, do I want to anticipate the D flat chord, or do I want to reinforce the C chord and then basically suspend into the D flat chord? I think I'm going to go with suspend. So here, I'm going to want to probably use a chord tone from the actual C. So I'm going to go down nice and low here, hit an octave on that. I did not hit an octave on that. I hit a 9. There we go. So now that's on the 5. Let's actually put this on the 3. And this isn't going to do a ton because it's going by pretty quick, and it is in the left hand, so the notes are kind of low. But still, that it's something that sometimes you just kind of feel it more than you actually hear it. So now we've got our D chord here. Let's move that up to the 3. And so now, and this is something we can look at. So we've got a 4 here and a 3 here. And in the case of the D flat, we're going to have a major chord, which means that the 3 and 4 are going to be a half step apart. Again, nothing necessarily wrong with that. Now, I have them separated by more than an octave, and the octave separation can do a lot to kind of cover up certain aspects of dissonance. But I feel like maybe if I were to take this to a 3, because then I would have chord tone here, and take this more to like, see, that was a 4, so take that to a 6. Let's hear this on its own. And yeah, that rhythm just totally works. Because interestingly, in this case, if you were to put this all together, it would be straight eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and, oh, I guess I skipped the 4 on this one because I moved this note. So almost straight eighth notes on that. Yeah, totally digging that. Again, saving often as I go along here. That's a big thing to do. And now we get to this E flat chord. So what do we got going on with E flat? We've got an E flat minor. So we've got our E flat here. Now here, because I basically just trailed straight down, I might just go right to this E flat here as well. And that just because that line could work very nicely. But then here, now I haven't put in any other chord tones yet, but moving this up to the 3 and basically putting it in between these two notes, that may work a little better. And I do like that better. It's also notable, this rhythm on the bass, rhythmically identical to what I did in the harpsichord here. The notes are different, but rhythmically it's eighth, quarter, 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 eighth. Like I said, it's a rhythm that I like. You will see this on my guitars, pianos, harpsichord, strings. I think I may have done that in the strings that we were doing earlier. It's entirely possible I did not. I do not have a perfect memory. And I feel like here, this might be a good place to let the harpsichord kind of rip a bit, just for maybe half a measure. Something like this. Maybe not like that. That did not sound good. And maybe we'll end up not doing it at all. That's always something I like to be open to, is just cutting it back out. That I can work with a lot better. And now, so here I just kind of put these notes in. And we've done this a few times where we go and we look at what is the chord and all of that, how does it relate. But what I'm kind of looking at now, particularly because I am taking this out of key on the next chord, I'm using this D natural rather than a D flat. And I'm doing this specifically because of this chord change, where I'm going from a D minor to a D flat major. So the 3, which in this case is our F note, that remains the same. So it's sharing a third on this, and this is basically using what we would call an altered or chromatic mediant. And I think we used both the chromatic mediant and submediant somewhere in here. I don't recall where. I'm fairly sure. It might have been in this harpsichord stuff. So I kind of want to get our ears prepped for this. And so here I've got an E flat chord. A D flat would be a D natural would be a major 7. And last time I was doing my composition stream, I talked about that my buddy Steven had asked about dominant 7 chords in metal. He actually asked about major 7 chords. So I put a whole bunch of dominant chords in here. But he was actually asked about major 7. So this is where I might be able to funkify this chord. So if I turn this into an E flat So this would actually, this is an E flat minor. So this would not qualify for what he was asking about. But the chord note is the minor major 7. Some people refer to this as the James Bond chord. You take a minor chord, which most commonly would get a minor 7, and you put a major 7 in it. And it's kind of got that spy movie or kind of Twilight Zone kind of feel, like, oh, something's going to happen, but we don't know what. It's a great feel. So maybe anticipating this, turning this into a minor major 7 here could be kind of good. And I feel like maybe if I were to go on the half note, put in the major, so right now we have a D flat, so we'll take this to a D natural. Okay, and now I kind of want to start to look at my bit of composition up here and say, okay, let's do some things that are going to be congruent with this. So I got my D natural, so B flat, so this is going to basically be, the D natural is the major third of this. The A against the D, that's going to be basically the 5th of the D. Here we go to an E, so a D versus an E. Let's actually, that's an F. D to an F is going to be a minor third. We're good there. We got the G, that's a 4. Let's move this down and go to the D natural as well. Here. And then, so we got just a bit of anticipation. I want to bring this down to the C. And I'm almost inclined to go to a C sharp. No, because that would be the same as the D flat. I'll say there's an inclination to go to the C sharp to be the major 7 of the D, but I don't want the major 7 because that would be enharmonic to the D flat. Well, let's try this. I don't know if I like the D up here. Maybe if I just did the C note. Let's listen to this on its own. I think that the D natural there might be enough. I think I can work with that. Cool. Okay. And again, I am saving often. I'm gonna drink some water here. How long have we been streaming for? We've been streaming for about 2.5 hours. That's not bad. I do have a student tonight at 8, so I'll probably want to get a bite to eat prior to that. I think I'm going to go a 6 below this, so that'll be the same as my 3rd. And now, so we're working with a D minor chord. Bring this up, maybe hit the 3 of that. And maybe the 5 as well. Put the 5, oh, wait. Yeah, the 5, so that'll be the 5 of the chord. And here, I remember talking about this a bit as we composed this. I basically took the guitar chords and started more sparse and then got more and more information. And we don't go particularly crazy with these, even at the end here. We do get more information going. So I almost feel like the harpsichord at this point should probably go a little more sparse and allow those guitars to kind of control the narrative, so to speak. Okay, so what I want to do with this now, I'm kind of thinking maybe something here. Actually, wanted this on the quarter, half here. So I'll do a dotted half here to a quarter here, and then I'll do half notes up here. But I want to just repeat the same notes though. So that is the 3. What if we took, so in the case of the D natural, we're then going to have oh, I'm drawing a blank here. Drawing a blank. Well, let's just look at it. We got an E flat, an F, the E flat. So this, so the E flat, so that is going to be a minor 9. The minor 9s are kind of working in this particular thing. It's much more common to hear extensive use of the major 9. Very Satriani kind of a thing. Love me some Satriani, man. That guy is fantastic. And I really like the major 9s. When we do the minor 9s, they tend to be concentrating around 2 very distinct dissonances, because we have a diminished 5th against the 5 of the chord, and we have the minor 9 against the root of the chord. And those are 2 of our most dissonant intervals, and we're kind of adding them on top of one another. But also, I don't have extensive use of I guess I'm against the 5 here, but I've separated it out. So we do have our diminished 5th going on there, but it's, I feel like this is kind of working. And I want to do something in here to kind of reinforce this a little bit. So what if I was to do something like that? I think that works. So there again we have our F. I don't know if I want that chord there. Okay, so we got a C, we got a D and an E flat, we got an F. So the D, okay, E flat F. Oh no, I was saying the E flat wrong. The E flat. I should have been saying F every time I said E flat. Totally looked at that wrong. Okay, so that's just the 3rd. Okay, and that okay. Now I see why that's not hitting me wrong, because I've been saying the wrong letter the whole time. These things do happen. Okay. And now we're back. So in this case, now what we're doing is we're dropping this down to a D natural. And so I'm going to reinforce that with the 3 for sure. I think I want a little bit of a lead up here. So if I were to go to C sharp in this case. Essentially it's the D flat again, but I'm kind of using it to lead us. No wait, so the C sharp and the D, so I would want a D natural here. No. I would want a C natural. That's what I want. The major 7 of the D flat. Yes. All right, can work with that. And then we're going back to a D natural right here. And so in this case, so I've got the D natural here. Let's put an octave of that down below. Put this on the 3rd. And what can I reinforce this with? So we have the F here to reinforce that, and maybe just that note. Well, I mean, well, what if I put the 5 below it? That would give us an interval of a fourth, but that might be all right here. And interestingly, even though it's been that far apart, I don't like going back to this F note here. So let's not do that. Let's actually put the F. Well, then I'd be doing the exact same thing. Oh, there's nothing wrong with G. Yeah, let's do that. Let's put the F there. So this hand, the left hand, will just hit that. And then instead of the F, let's put this also on a, not a D sharp. That's probably all we need with what's going on in the guitars. Yeah, and I feel like this, let's see, so we're on the D natural here. So let's take, in this case, I really kind of feel like I want to go to an E flat here. So the E flat is going to be, I'm on the, so that'd be like a major 9. That might work. There we're down on the 5 and the 9. I think that is working for me pretty well. But I almost feel like there should be a little bit of a run up here. Maybe put this on the root. And then let the major 9 come up here. I definitely am pleased with the way this is moving us into the interlude in this case. And so here, okay, so now here we've got our B double flat, which is the same as an A. So the E leads to the A just fine. I kind of feel like having just a slightly smaller interval to move into this might work. So what about from the E to the B flat to the B double flat? Yeah, because now basically the B flat is just is kind of acting as an upper leading tone, so to speak, down to the B double flat or A. Oh, and that gives us kind of a nice little chromatic line from the B flat to the B double flat to the A flat. So that's kind of, let me listen to this just with the harpsichord here. Except I really kind of liked having that happen right there, because I felt like this line was good. I'm just gonna repeat that E flat there, because that's what I'm feeling in this. All right, let's listen to this whole thing in context with. Let's actually do this. So we're gonna put in everything we've written, because fortunately the A section comes right after that part. So we're gonna listen to everything we've done here, from the E section to the break to where it goes back into the A section where we wrote those strings. And let's see how this flows. And then I think I'm probably going to start thinking about signing off. Probably grab a bite to eat and get ready for students. Well, student, I just got one left today. Okay, so we're listening to the E section, the break section or interlude little thing there, and then into the A section. Let's see what this does for us. The file is saved. Here we go. I like it. I'm pleased. I hope you, whoever's out there watching, I hope you enjoyed this little music theory nerd session. I love nerding out on music theory. It's just so much fun. And it's just this wild thing that I have been studying this stuff for decades. And I still just, when I'm talking about music theory, I just get super excited like this. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I started a new classical guitar student. And she's someone that I've known for years. She's super nice. And so we're talking, and I'm like, yeah, you know, if I start to get ahead of you, just feel free to be like, Randy, bring it back in, because I get so excited talking about this stuff. Because it's just something I enjoy. And I study this stuff pretty much daily, and I'm just constantly surprised at how much I can continue to learn about frickin' music theory. There's just so much of it out there, and I know that I haven't even really hit even the majority of it, even just within Western music theory, which is the part that I study, you know, leaving out different music theories of different cultures. There's a massive amount of music theory in Asian music cultures and Indian classical music. There's so much out there, and it's like, you know, you could live for 500 lifetimes and still be figuring new stuff out. And so I'm just fascinated by it. It's really cool. I'm pleased with the way this song is coming along. I think that Giovanni and Finn are really going to like it. And it should be good. So, yes, that's all I've got for the day. Again, if you're coming in late, if you're not familiar with this is not my most typical type of stream. I more commonly do concert-style streams. I was going to do that today, but when I started up, my hands were so cold, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to play guitar worth a darn. So we just sat down and did some composition, did some composition instead. And so that's where we got to with all of this. But I will be back tomorrow. I'm doing daily streams at least until the end of March. So far, I've been enjoying that, and I will try to have warm hands tomorrow, do concert style. I think tomorrow I'm probably going to play Patron Saint of Murderers, because we didn't get to finish it in the Murder Metal show. I ran out of time and only played like 4 songs off of it. And maybe On the Contrary is one I've been thinking about pulling out again. Very soon I need to practice through Attending the Shenanigans. I haven't played that since I started up the daily streams, so that's on its way soon. And I still haven't played Infinity -1, Behind the Black Door, or Book with No Story of some of my earlier stuff. So I got to get to those as well. Definitely that'll all be coming up. But yeah, concert style stream most likely tomorrow. And if you like what you see, you like what you hear, you like what you smell, go to themadpoet.com.